I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I want to talk about the metaphysics of Neoplatonism. This is a difficult essay, so I do suggest that you turn on the subtitles, which is the CC button at the bottom right hand of the screen. Separated by over half a millennia from his true master, Plato, who was born in year 427 before the Common Era, Plotinus, born in year 204 of the Common Era, interprets and synthesizes Platonic philosophy with the thinking of Aristotle and the pre-Socratics to deliver a novel ontology. Plotinus is the father of Neoplatonism, and his principal writings are contained in the Enneads, which means 9 in Greek. While the philosophy from Plotinus and his followers is today called Neoplatonism, they understood themselves to be simply Platonists, that is, thinkers who follow Plato's doctrines despite how innovative their resultant theories turned out to be. The metaphysics of Neoplatonism remains an important and coherent system in philosophy, though its biggest impact may arguably be felt in theology, where its ideas shaped doctrines in religions such as Christianity and influenced the thinking of its saints such as Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. Some of its ideas, such as how to connect to the One through what seems akin to meditative practices, are similar to those found in Hindu and Buddhist conception of the Atman and enlightenment. Some scholars believe that Neoplatonic ideas developed independently from these sources, while others consider Neoplatonism to be an eclectic philosophy which drew on these Indian religions which predate Neoplatonism and indeed Plato. Plato himself may have been influenced by ideas in Hinduism and Buddhism, since trade routes already existed connecting Greece to Asia even in ancient times. What is eminently possible is that humanity faced similar questions over the ages and may have hence come up with similar answers. As Plotinus tells us in his letter to Flaccus, he is leery of writing and only committed word to paper because of the persuasion of his student Porphyry to overcome his reluctance so that posterity can benefit from his wisdom. His eyesight was bad, which made it difficult for him to revise his writings, leaving it riddled with errors. It is Porphyry who edited and compiled Plotinus's writings made over a lifetime of contemplation and teaching. He arranged them into 6 books of 9 chapters each, making a total of 54 chapters. His order is not chronological but thematic. The entire work deals with Plotinus's metaphysics and its epistemological and ethical implications. The what, how do we know, and the so what, in ponderous detail over 900 pages. We can see its gradual development and its thorough argumentation, drawing on the thoughts of Plato, Aristotle, and the pre-Socratics, sometimes using them as support, sometimes as opponents. Metaphysics is the basis for Plotinus's philosophy, with its epistemology and ethics a result of his metaphysics compared to Plato, whose writings were more concerned with ethics and politics. Plotinus's ontology is most clearly expounded in the 5th book and not the 1st, as Porphyry has ordered it. Imagine having to first plow through about 500 pages before getting to the crux. Hence, I will use the first chapter of the 5th book entitled On the 3 Primary Hypostases, the final chapter of the Enneads entitled On the Good or the One, his letter to Flaccus, the second chapter of the 3rd book entitled On Providence 1, and secondary literature to draw out what is vital in Neoplatonism. However, before we can embark on Plotinus's Enneads, we must understand what Plato taught, minimally his theory of forms. Prior to us being born as physical human beings in the material or sensible world, our souls were in a realm where the perfect versions of things exist, a realm of forms or the intelligible world. There we experience these forms, and while much is forgotten, when given the right triggers, we are able to recollect them later when we are living in the sensible world. The reason we recognize justice, love, beauty, and other such concepts is because we recognize the form of these in the objects we cognize in the sensible world. For instance, we recognize the beauty in the beautiful horse because the beauty of the horse corresponds to the form of beauty, the form being the perfect archetype of beauty in the intelligible world. The beauty of the horse in the sensible world participates in the form of beauty in the intelligible world. While Plato has reservations over whether there are forms of natural objects, such as the forms of human beings, horses, mountains, or rocks, he does not doubt that there are no forms of undignified things such as hair or mud, being just what they are observed to be in the sensible world. They do not exist in the intelligible world. He also does not think there are forms of man-made artifacts such as tables and chairs, though he confusingly does employ living things and artifacts as examples of forms, such as the perfect horse or horseness as the essence of a horse, as does Plotinus. There are also no forms of evil things, since the intelligible world is a world of perfection. We will find out later in this essay why, even though there is no evil form, there is evil in the sensible world. Plotinus's metaphysics revolves around three hypostases, which are the ultimate ontological realities and explanatory principles. Plotinus, like Plato, distinguishes between the intelligible world and the sensible world. The sensible world is the material world we live in, which we experience through our faculty of sense perception. Then there is the intelligible world, which we cannot sense through our five senses, but can apprehend through our intellect in our soul. Porphyry ordered the Enneads bottom up instead of top down, starting at what is closest to us, the sensible world, so that by the later chapters, the readers will be prepared for the higher order principles. At the start of Book 5, Plotinus asks how, if there is something so powerful and perfect, from which all life has descended and to which we belong to ultimately, how did we not realize it and instead seem to have forgotten about it? Our fallenness is exacerbated by how we have directed our attention and energies towards the material aspects of ourselves, such as our bodily needs and desires, leaving us mired in the sensible world rather than the spiritual aspects of ourselves, which connects us to the intelligible world and from there to the One. How then can this be corrected? He provides two ways. The first is to realize that these material things we have honored is unworthy of our honor. The second is to realize that we have a lineage which connects us to the magnificence of the One, which then helps us realize how unworthy the material world is. What causes us to seek to elevate ourselves is our soul, which is where Plotinus believes we need to begin our investigation, because it is closest to ourselves, making it the easiest place to start from. At this point, however, he makes a big leap from our individual souls to capital S soul. The soul, which is the principle that creates the cosmos and gives it and the living things within it life. Soul itself made the sun and this great heaven, and it ordered it and makes it circulate in a regular way, being a nature different from that which it orders, from that which it moves, and from that which it makes to be alive, he writes. The soul exists eternally, while the things that it gives order to are temporal, as material things that waste away. Soul emanates its power the way the sun emanates its rays of light. Soul entered into the body of heaven and gave it life, gave it immortality and wakened it from sleep, he adds. Plotinus also considers the cosmos as a living thing, the way Plato called it an animal for that reason in his dialogue, the Timaeus, which I've made a video of as linked in the description. Soul permeates everything. This ability to permeate everything may seem confusing for those still thinking in a materialist mode. Soul is incorporeal, immaterial, and hence does not occupy space and time the way physical objects do. My own way of thinking about this is to consider how electromagnetic waves bathe everything, the soul being analogous to them. These waves penetrate everything, but not everything is receptive to them. Objects that have the ability to receive electromagnetic waves, such as radios and televisions, are able to tune in, while those that do not, say a table or pencil, do not display any signs that they are bathed in these waves, though it remains that they are. Analogously, bodies such as human, plant and animal bodies that have the ability to partake of the soul become alive and acquire thought, while objects that do not have this ability, such as rocks, do not gain life, though they too remain bathed in the soul. At this point, an inquiring mind will quite naturally ask where the soul came from. In Plotinus' system, soul is an image of intellect, an expression of the principle of intellect, making it an external activity of intellect, while the intellect's internal activity is self-contemplation of the forms it contains. By probing deeper and deeper, we have embarked on Plotinus' method of ascending upwards. He describes: take someone who starts by marveling at this sensible cosmos, looking at its expanse and its beauty and its everlasting motion and the gods in it, both the visible and the invisible ones, and the daemons, and all the animals and plants. Let him then ascend to the archetype of this cosmos and the truer reality, and in the intelligible world, let him see all that is intelligible and eternal in it, with its own comprehension and life, and pure intellect presiding over these, and indescribable wisdom, and the life that is truly dead under the reign of Kronos, a god of fullness and intellect. In intellect, all the forms that compose the intellect are perfect. Intellect thinks not by way of inquiring, but by having what it thinks, writes Plotinus. The way intellect thinks is not like how our souls think, which is discursively, through a process of inquiry and argumentation. The thoughts of soul change in its attention, now thinking of object A, then later of object B. But the thoughts of intellect are the forms which do not change. There is no past, now, or later in the intelligible realm. No time that marks change, indeed no change, since all beings are stable in it. Plotinus writes, intellect, insofar as it thinks, makes being come to exist, and being, by its being taught, gives to intellect its thinking, which is its existence. By thinking about being, intellect brings being into existence. Intellect's activity is the activity of thinking, and this thinking is about beings, which are the forms that constitute intellect. The beings in their totality, which is what is being thought of by intellect, is what intellect is. Hence, intellect is thinking about itself. Intellect and being are on the same level in the intelligible world, because intellect is the beings it thinks. They are one and the same. They coexist simultaneously and do not abandon each other, but this one thing is nevertheless two. Intellect and being, thinking and what is being taught. Intellect insofar as it is thinking, being insofar as it is what is being taught. For thinking could not occur if there was not difference as well as identity. Though both are the same thing, in any act of thinking, there is the subject, in this case intellect, which is the thinker, which thinks about beings, which are the objects of its thought. It is at the level of the intelligible world that two arises, and from this two at this high level arises the multiplicity of the many beings, what Plotinus calls the one many. From this, Plotinus infers 6 categories or genuses that can exhaustively describe all of existence, a reduction from Aristotle's 10 categories. They are intellect, being, difference, identity, motion, and stability. Motion are actions. In the case of intellect, its motion is its action of thinking. Stability is how the beings remain stable in the intelligible world. Difference is the difference between the thinker and its thoughts. If you were to remove difference, it would become one and fall silent, notes Plotinus. There would be no thinking if there was no difference between the thinker and what is taught. Yet there is also identity, a unity of intellect with itself, a commonality between all its objects which are forms or beings. From these principles or genuses, all the other things arise. The differences between the beings producing number, quantity and quality, which are the differences that distinguish between the beings. Yet we have not reached the very top of everything, because the cause of thinking is something else, something that is also the cause of being. The logic underlying Plotinus's metaphysics is that the buck stops at what must ultimately be something simple and completely unified. The many must, in the finite analysis, come from what is one. This first thing is not a composite of many things, but it is completely just itself, simple with no parts. He calls it the One. There must be a one as a matter of epistemological logical necessity, since for everything in motion, there is something towards which it moves. The thing to which everything in motion moves towards must itself then be static, since it will otherwise also be moving towards something, which will then be the ultimate or the one. This logic is similar to Aristotle's reasoning in postulating the unmoved mover. The buck must stop somewhere. Even motion must come after the one. If motion was prior to it, then there must be something before the one, making that thing the one instead of the actual one. Hence the one was unmoved, neither inclining nor having willed anything nor moving in any way, Plotinus tells us. Once again, Plotinus turns to the metaphor of the sun. The light of the sun illuminates everything, without itself being decreased in any way by the reception of the light by objects. The sun emits its light because it is so full of power that it just emanates the light from itself outwards. We have to remember that the understanding of how the sun works in Plotinus's time differs from our current understanding. For him, the sun is in itself a monolith, an eternal source of power which does not derive its power from anything else, but is so full of it that it can keep emitting light forever without being in any way reduced by its emission. The one like the sun is this eternal source of unending power that powers everything else, everything depending on it while it depends on nothing else but itself. It is self-sufficient and perfect. But because it is perfect, it generates. It generates not out of a need for anything, since perfection entails self-sufficiency, which means it has no needs whatsoever. Yet, since it is such a great power, it could not be barren, goes the ancient reasoning. Because it is so perfect, its power overflows, generating something that is not itself. That which is always perfect always generates something everlasting, and it generates something inferior to itself, posits Plotinus. This is axiomatic for the logic of Plotinus's metaphysics. Let us reconstruct his reasoning. We see evidence of existence all around us in the sensible world. These existences must have a cause. As we move up the chain of causes, we will go from the sensible world to the intelligible world of souls, which follows from the forms, which is the intellect. Yet the intellect and its beings still have a cause, since they are a multiplicity, though they are united in a totality. The cause of such a multiplicity can only be a unity, which is the one. This one is perfect. Being perfect, it is also known as the good. Plotinus tells us that the good is in fact beyond good, and is good not for itself, but for other things. The one or the good is self-sufficient, complete, perfectly simple, and indivisible. It needs nothing and does not even think, because if it thinks, then the thinking and the thought are two things. The thing it generates, the intellect, is very good, but less perfect than the One. The intellect sees the One and is in need of it alone, but the One has no need of intellect, says Plotinus. The intellect then generates through its thought the soul, which is less perfect than intellect. This soul generates the sensible world. In other words, intellect is an activity of the One, soul is the activity of the intellect, and the sensible world is the activity of soul. Between the three hypostases of the One, the intellect, and the soul, nothing separates them other than their being different from one another. Recall that space, and hence spacious separation, only applies to material things. The three hypostases, despite being the ultimate realities, are immaterial. As we move down the lineage from the One, intellect and soul, to the sensible world, we are moving from perfection to the less perfect, from the most real to what is less real, as each stage is an image of the One above it. Because what is less real and perfect longs for what is more real and perfect, everything longs for that which generated it and loves this. This is another axiom in Plotinus's metaphysics. We should also note that while he speaks of the One as first, it is not as if there was a time before the existence of the One. Time itself, like space, did not exist before the arising of the intellect. The One is hence eternal, always having been there. And similarly, even though we talk of how intellect comes after the One, from the production of the One, it is not that the One at some later time decided to generate intellect. The One makes no decisions since it does not even think. It has no need to make anything, not even the intellect. Its perfection causes it to generate, and hence intellect and its beings, the forms and the soul, were all simultaneously in existence. The One does not think at all, while the intellect thinks itself. What intellect in its lesser but still great perfection generates is soul, which is an image of intellect. The soul thinks about other things including itself. It thinks discursively about them. Since soul derives from intellect, it possesses intellect which in one part it uses for calculative reasoning and another part which makes calculative reasoning possible. On its upper side, it is attached to intellect and filled up with it and enjoying it and sharing in it and thinking. And on the other side, attached to the things that came after it, which is in fact generated by it. As we descend this lineage, each stage is of increasing levels of inferiority and unreality. Because of this series of emanations starting from the One and flowing down all the way to the sensible world, all of which should rightly be looking upwards towards what is superior to it, culminating finally in the One, the universe is in concord. Yet, how does evil then arise? We know that there is evil in the sensible world since we can simply observe it. Yet in Plotinus's theory, there is no room for evil in the three hypostases. Plotinus draws on Plato's concept of the receptacle in the Timaeus and Aristotle's prime matter, positing matter as the limit of descent from the One. Plotinus's matter is the substrate which can take on form to then become a thing. Aristotle calls this addition of matter to form hylomorphism. In its unformed state, Plotinus considers matter as immaterial and formless, a kind of nothing which, because it is devoid of form, which is good, cannot be good. Since it is devoid of goodness, because it is poverty, is necessarily evil. A human being is comprised of a human soul embodied in matter. If the person is dominated or more attached to his material side compared to his spiritual side, then evil dominates in that person. Yet it is possible to mitigate or escape such a situation because we possess an eternal soul which contains its own intellect, having the faculty of calculative reasoning. Plotinus reasons that this faculty of calculative reasoning resides in no corporeal organ, since it has its own activity in purity in order that it also be possible for it to reason purely, uncontaminated by the body and its desires, in a kind of mind-body dualism in line with Plato. While the soul has the ability to reason purely, it does not always do so when it is contaminated by the demands of the body, hence making the ascension of the soul towards the One impossible. To ascend, we need to not incline to the body even by acts of imagination, and to alienate ourselves from the body if somehow one could lead the remaining part of the soul upwards, says Plotinus. This echoes what Socrates said to his friends on his last day as recounted in Plato's Phaedo. Socrates was not afraid to die, since he would then be relieved of the body, which demands impede his soul's communion with the intelligible world. The body will perish, but the soul is immortal. He explains that the pursuit of philosophy is a preparation for death, since the knowledge sought by a philosopher is on the forms which the soul will be reunited with after death. Plotinus reasons that because the faculty of calculative reasoning seeks to know whether a thing is of its essence, for instance, if a thing is beautiful, it requires a standard to compare against, which means that there necessarily must exist such a standard, since how else could it engage in calculative reasoning? Such standards are of course the forms. To perceive the true reality of the intelligible world onwards to the One, Plotinus tells us that we must revert inwards and focus our attention there. Using the analogy now of sound, we need to let go of sensible sounds, except insofar as they are necessary, and guard the soul's pure power of apprehension and be ready to listen to the sounds from above. By this, he concedes that we need to take care of the body's requirements for survival, but to put aside all else so as to be able to make the ascent towards the One. In the final chapter of the Enneads, chapter 9 of Ennead 6, Plotinus turns to the nature of the One. While absolute unity is a characteristic only of the One, all things have unity within them. The One has no parts, and hence no division or multiplicity within itself. It is a monolithic and simple being. Other things are not simple in the sense that they are composite. They are made up of parts, but these parts, when unified in the thing, makes it one object, one being. His example is how a choir or an army is comprised of disparate members, but when they come together and act together, they form a unity. If they do not act together, then the unity is destroyed, and with it the choir or the army. Instead, they become a bunch of individual singers or individual soldiers, losing the essence or the substantiality of the choir or army. When totally disunited, they are something else, not a choir or an army at all, while if merely less unified, a poorer choir or army. On the soul, it too has parts such as its various faculties of calculative reasoning, desiring, perceiving, which are unified by a bond. Because it is unified, it bestows unity on the human being, but it gets its unity from the form of unity. The One is not intellect, which has a multiplicity of the forms, nor is it soul or anything else. Plotinus proceeds via negativa to talk about what the One is not, since it is ineffable, and hence cannot be described directly. For the nature of the One, being generative of all beings, is to be identified with none of them, he writes. This Neoplatonic method influenced the method of negative theology to expound the nature of God by telling us what He is not, since our knowledge is insufficient to describe what He is. To describe what a thing is, what Plotinus calls a scientific understanding, depends on form, but since the One precedes form, we are unable to comprehend what the One directly is. It is formless since it is prior to form. Plotinus suggests that because of this difficulty, the human intellect gets weary and wants to descend to sensible, solid reality. Therefore, to connect with the One, we need to lift oneself up from sensible beings and free oneself from all vice, in aiming towards the good. Since we are a manifold, we need to ascend to the principle in oneself of oneness, so that we can then be the spectator of a principle that is one. We need to entrust the soul to the intellect and subordinate it to intellect, so that being awakened, it may take in what the intellect sees. We need to use the pure reason of our intellect to contemplate the One, stripping away our sense perceptions so as to contemplate the purest thing by pure intellect, because sense perception will cause us to make images of what we suspect the One looks like, but that will be incorrect. Hence, we need to get rid of our way of using sense perception and turn to intellect, which can then think purely, though what precedes it is even purer and more simple, which means that even intellection will fall short of being able to comprehend the One. Plato says it is neither to be spoken nor written of, and yet Plotinus speaks and writes of the One. He does so not in order to describe the One, since that is impossible. He speaks and writes only as a way of directing others towards it, waking them up from discursive accounts to actual looking, showing the way to those wanting to see something. For teaching extends only to the road and the route, while looking is the work of those already wanting to see. We can only experience the One through a mystical experience, and is unable to cognize it intellectually or through our bodily sense perception. Plotinus is only attempting to show us the way, and as he writes when he was 56 years old in his letter to Flaccus, he himself has only managed to do it 3 times and then only temporarily, while Porphyry has not managed to even once. We have to put in the work ourselves through a process of purification, focusing our souls towards the intelligible and from there towards the One. Yet Plotinus tells us that the One is certainly absent from nothing and from everything. It is present without being present, except to those who are able to receive it. It is everywhere and yet not experienced, except for those who have the ability to experience it. Since the One is not anything we know of in accordance to the Neoplatonic via negativa approach, the soul should ignore everything, especially things in sense perception, but also in forms, and then in considering the One, come to ignore itself. Because our soul in a way shares a sameness and identity with the One, it is possible to connect to the One. When we do manage to connect, it is like reaching journey's end and rest, the end of discordance. When we are inclined towards the One, we exist to a greater degree, and our well-being is there, whereas being distant from it makes us alone and lesser in existence. The nearer we are to the One, the more reality we have in our existence. If we reach it, the soul both rests and is beyond evils, when it has reverted to that place free of evils. Since the intelligible world has no place for evils, when we are there, we too have no evil within us. We will live in beauty, justice, and virtue, and love when we live in the intelligible world, whereas in the sensible world, it is as if our soul has been banished and our feathers clipped. The natural state of soul is to want to become unified with God, he adds. While still alive in the sensible world, it is possible for us to have a vision of the One, but we cannot remain there because we still have our bodies which pulls us back down. Seeing and what was in a state of seeing is no longer reason but greater than reason, he writes. Experience surpasses theoretical knowledge. In experiencing the One, we are experiencing ourselves as one simple self. Plotinus clarifies that to talk of sight is just loose talk, since at the time of union, the seeing self neither sees nor discerns, nor imagines two things, but has in a way become another, become one, like a center touching a center point. When the person who experienced the vision returns to the sensible world, he has difficulty describing it because what was experienced is not something different from himself, but rather something united to himself. Plotinus elaborates. So since they were not two, but the seer was one with what is seen, as though it was not being seen by him, but was unified with him, if he remembers who he became when he mingled with the One, then he will have in himself an image of it. He was a One, and contains no difference relative to himself, nor in any other respect. For nothing moved in him, neither spiritedness nor appetite for anything else was present in him when he reverted to the One, but also not reason, nor intellection, nor he himself, if one should say that. He was instead ravished or ecstatic in solitary quiet, in an unwobbling fixedness, unwavering from his own substantiality in any way, not rotating about himself, entirely stable as if he were the stability itself. Nor had he any desire for beautiful things, having already surpassed beauty, having already outdone the chorus of virtues. It is like someone who enters the inner sanctum and leaves behind the statues of the gods in the temple. The statue and the image are actually secondary visions, whereas the One itself is indeed not a vision, but another manner of seeing. It is self-transcendence, simplification and surrender, an urging towards touch, arresting concentration on alignment. This is the way of life of gods and divine happy human beings, the release from everything here, a way of life that takes no pleasure in things here, the refuge of a solitary in the solitary. In his letter to Flaccus, he lays out how the journey to reach journey's end, which is a reunion with the One, can be made. He calls this reunion a return to that glorious, that only real country, the world of unseen truth. He tells Flaccus that to make that return, we need to tame the body, which will yield only to watchful, strenuous constancy of habit. Purify your soul from all undue hope and fear about earthly things. Mortify the body, deny self, affections as well as appetites, and the inner eye will begin to exercise its clear and solemn vision. When we perceive the objects of the sensible world, all we get are appearances, images of the true reality which as images are not the true reality. Plotinus calls these opinions, that is, what is not knowledge. Many people, the ordinary and practical man, are caught up with these appearances, but these are unimportant because what is important is true reality, which can only be found behind appearances. But how can the mind, our soul, perceive these true ideas or forms when the objects are necessarily different from the appearances which are images of the true objects? We certainly are unable to, so long as the objects remain as things external to us, since they will then be imperfectly known. Instead, we have to contemplate them as within us, where the object being contemplated and the subject contemplating, that is ourselves, are identical when both are thoughts. Like can only approach like, and hence both have to be thoughts for them to meet each other. Plotinus rejects the correspondence theory of truth, where truth is the agreement of our apprehension of an external object with the object itself, since these are what he calls opinions. Instead, truth is the agreement of the mind with itself. Consciousness, therefore, is the sole basis of certainty, he writes. Plotinus does not deny the veracity of the material world as an idealist would, since his metaphysics involves a hylomorphism where material objects are the addition of matter to form. However, following the Platonic theory of forms, what is real are not the objects of the sensible world, but instead what is in the intelligible world, which are the forms. Hence, knowledge has 3 degrees: opinion, science, illumination. Our sense perception can provide us only with opinion. For science, we employ discursive reason, but to apprehend the forms, we have to go beyond sense perception and discursive reason to intuit them. That is, to know them not through theorizing about them, but to recognize them directly, which we do by the identity of the mind knowing with the object known. How can this be done? It is by ascending from our existence in the sensible world to the intelligible realm and finally to the One. We already have a longing to do so because there is within what has been generated a desire to go towards its generator, what Plato calls love, which is a child of poverty and plenty. It is because of the plenitude of the One that the other hypostases of intellect and soul are generated, which then leads to the generation of the sensible world. But the poverty we have as beings in the sensible world is what causes the love or longing to reunite with the One through the lineage of the hypostasis. If not that love is blessing, is salvation, is our guardian genius, without it, the centrifugal law will overpower us and sweep our souls out far from their source towards the co-extremities of the material and the manifold, he explains. Centrifugal force is the pull we feel in our palms when we swing a mass tied with a string in a circle. Love is what is causing us to hold on to the string. If we let go, the mass would fly outwards. He who does not understand how the soul contains the beautiful within itself seeks to realize beauty without by laborious production, writes Plotinus. For those ignorant of the greater perfection of the intelligible world, they will seek beauty in the objects of the sensible world, which will be a labor in vain. Instead, he should concentrate and simplify, and so to expand his being, in order to ascend towards the One. Yet this mental work of concentration, simplification, and purification is not merely through the use of our faculty of reason. We need to go beyond reason to liberate our minds from its finite consciousness so as to get to our essential self, our essence, because our essence, the essence of soul, is not finite but infinite, just as the soul, the intellect, and the One are infinite. Yet because we are still bodily creatures, such illuminations are only temporary, though they can recur. It is only when our physical bodies finally die that those who are ready can have a permanent union with the One. While in our earthly bodies though, Plotinus points out 3 different paths we can take to experience these episodes of illumination. 1. The love of beauty which exalts the poet. 2. That devotion to the One and that ascent of science which makes the ambition of the philosopher. And 3. That love and those prayers by which some devout and ardent soul tends in its moral purity towards perfection. The first is through the artistic pursuit of beauty, the second through the philosophic pursuit of knowledge, and the third through spiritual devotion leading to purification. On the first 2 paths, Plotinus has told us that the pursuit of beauty and knowledge of the sensible world is insufficient, since they are only knowledge of appearances. However, they can be starting points which leads to further inquiry into the forms which are the basis of these appearances. Yet this can only bring us to the level of the intelligible world. From there, through a process of spiritual purification and simplification, where thought itself needs to be abandoned, since thought is a mere preliminary to communion with God, can we finally experience a mystical union with the One. We need to lose ourselves, in order to find ourselves. I have named this next section of my essay Theodicy, as Plotinus's arguments resemble Gottfried Leibniz's defense of an omnipotent God against the problem of evil, though Plotinus predates Leibniz by 1,400 years. Leibniz is the inventor of the word theodicy. In Aeneid's 3, Chapter 2, entitled On Providence 1, Plotinus writes, "Intellect is in a way an archetype and model of this universe, which is an image that always really exists because of it. In the intelligible world, the beings are in harmony with one another since they are in unity in the intellect. There, everything is together in the identical place and nothing is vying and at odds with or hindering anything else. Yet once something develops into a mess, different parts could be in different places and one part could actually hinder another, and one thing could consume something else," he adds. The embodiment of form in matter leads necessarily to a division, along with needs and desires which were not present in the intelligible world. The form of a tiger has no need of food, while the embodied tiger does. This set the things of the sensible world at odds with one another. Yet if the embodied tiger does not eat, it cannot survive. Some things has to be destroyed to effect the generation of others, Plotinus notes. However, at the total level of the sensible universe, there is a unified order. Among the parts of the cosmos, at the local level, there may be strife and suffering, but at the cosmic level, everything seems to fall into place. The universe as a whole is complete in itself, self-sufficient and lacking in nothing, because everything is within it. Not everything is equal, for instance the tiger and the lamb in their strength and power. But as a whole, the tiger eating the lamb is as things should be. There is no injustice being done since the tiger requires nutrition and the lamb is its rightful nutrition. While animals eating one another are necessary as part of the food chain, Plotinus recognizes that some human injustice against one another may be unnecessary and evil. However, at the level of totality, there is also remedial justice in his system through reincarnation. His theory of reincarnation is similar to that of Buddhism and Hinduism, where souls that are mired in worldly concerns will reincarnate as creatures appropriate to their previous levels of goodness or viciousness, for nothing can ever escape what is laid down within the law of the universe. The principle of soul fits them not by making them worse, but by assigning them to places befitting them according to their worth, across not just space but also time. For instance, a murderer reincarnating as a murder victim. It is certainly not by chance that a person becomes a slave, nor does one just happen to become a prisoner or be abused physically for no reason, but a person who was once the perpetrator of what he now finds himself suffering, writes Plotinus. There is an ineluctable wisdom of the universe, in other words, as Hinduism and Buddhism preach, karma. While local and temporary injustice may occur, global justice will ultimately prevail, though it may take multiple lifetimes to balance the scales completely. We must look upon murders and every kind of death and the capture and plundering of cities as though they were on theatre stages. All of them are transitions, changes of costume, enactments of dirges and lamentations, he writes. Continuing the metaphor of the play, not every character is the same. Variety is needed, and if there is variety, then there must be a natural inequality between them. It wouldn't be a good play if one expels the inferior characters, since they too contribute to its completeness, he writes. He considers this state of affairs as what Leibniz would call the best of all possible worlds. The various characters may be fighting each other, but at the level of the whole plot of the play, the plot is unified. The play brings the elements of conflict into a single harmony by creating a kind of entire symphonic narrative of the conflicts. the same way that different musical notes can create a harmony. There is one part that is good and the other bad, and this combination makes it a good performance, writes Plotinus. He gives an example of how in a human body, the finger is not as good or as powerful as the eye, but each part playing its role makes the entire body well. We do not want to have a body that is just full of eyes. Similarly, in a society, we need all sorts. The public executioner, though he is a rook, does not make a well-ordered city worse. For this person too is needed in the city. There is also often need of a person of this kind, and he too is part of the good order, he writes. It is not that the better has made the worse, but those things that ought to receive what is better are not able to receive it because of their own nature, or by chance, or by others preventing them, explains Plotinus. Having free will means that we can incline sometimes towards the better, sometimes towards the worse. Besides, even things considered bad and evil are not useless in the big picture, since they give birth to other things. For instance, the retribution visited on wicked people can be a useful moral lesson for all, while the umbrage stirred up by injustice makes virtue all the more praiseworthy and can stimulate people to take remedial action, a higher order virtue coming into existence because of evil. In the Aeneads, Plotinus builds up a comprehensive and coherent metaphysical system based on Platonic realism. It relies on several axiomatic presuppositions, such as how the perfect must generate what is less perfect, how what is complex must come from the simpler, and what is inferior desires what is superior. Several lines of attack are hence possible. The axioms are not self-evident. Criticisms of the theory of forms will also apply to his system, while his comic explanation can seem like victim blaming. Yet the extent to which parts of his theory has been adopted by many philosophies and theologies demonstrate how important his ideas are, making at least a casual familiarity with the Aeneads a requirement for the student of philosophy. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.